Learn how to get started with Azure Communication Services and build a chat app in this first of 2 episodes of Azure Tips and Tricks. Building applications that use communication features like chat, SMS and voice calls can be hard. Azure Communication Services makes it easier by providing APIs that provide capabilities like chat. This video is the first of a series of 2 and explains how to get started with Azure Communication Services. We'll start by creating a new Communication Services resource in the Azure portal. Here it is. Alright. First, I'll select a resource group. OK. And now I'll fill in a name, like this one. And that's it. And now I can create it. There we go. I'll skip to when it is done. OK, here it is, an Azure Communication Services resource. With this, I can build apps that can chat, send and receive SMS, do voice over IP calls and more. And to use the APIs for these services, I need the details from here, the endpoint and connection string. Alright, let's create an app. I've already created an ASP.NET Core web app in Visual Studio and I'll walk you through what I've done. First, I created a standard ASP.NET Core MVC app, which is what you see here. And next, I added 2 services with interfaces, a chat service and an access token service. This is the chat service. Here in the constructor, it gets an access token service, which we'll see in a bit, and the endpoint of the Azure Communication Service. And it uses those to first get an access token from the access token service, which creates a communication credential, which we use to create a chat client and ultimately a chat thread client, which we use to send and receive chat messages. This chat client and the other classes come from the Communication Services SDK, which I've added as NuGet packages to the application. Here they are. An administration one for getting the access token and a chat service package. Now I inject the services into the app in the startup class in the configure services method here. And here I pass the service details like the endpoint and connection string of the Azure Communication Service, which I keep in my appsettings.json file here. Remember that you can find these in the keys menu of the communication service in the Azure portal. Okay, let's go back to the chat service. So with all of this, I issue a new access token to get access to the communication service in the access token service here. And once I'm authenticated and have created the chat thread client, I send the first message to the chat thread with the send message method. The app acts like a bot, telling the user to provide a phone number. Now let's see the UI. I show the chat window in the index view here. In here, there is a text box and a button that the user can use to send messages. And there is a view component that I load. That is this one. This loops over the chat messages that are in the thread and displays them. And it gets those messages in the chat view component class here. It uses the get messages method of the chat service class. This gets the latest messages from the chat thread and checks if the message contains a phone number. If it does, it tells the user. And if it doesn't, it asks the user for a valid number. Those messages go into the chat thread and again get displayed in the view component. Okay, let's run this and see what it does. Here it is. And it has sent a first message asking me for a phone number. Let's see. No. This gets checked as not a valid phone number, so the app asks me again. Alright, now I'll give it my number. That's it. And the app recognizes it and tells me. This simple example shows how you can easily use the Azure Communication Services SDK to add chat in your app. Go and check it out.